So, see, today, if you look at, the world economy is built on exploitation. So, it is exploitation of everything. It is not only animals, but even human exploitation. So, drawing a line is not the question. It's more a question of striking a balance. And the more and more, you are aware of it, as in our case, as in my case, especially, see, I have my journey, even though I had a very strong, connection with animals, my relationship with them, my understanding about them has also changed over the years. And today, if you ask me, I think that every animal has equal right as a human. That is how the world is. I mean, that is how nature has intended it to be. And as humans, we have come and disturbed that kind of a balance which nature had intentionally put in place. And as humans, we feel that everything is ours to take, and the overwhelming desire to um, usurp and establish control and supremacy has resulted in a lot of disturbance. And most of the conflicts that you see today with animals and humans, and why that question of whether it is human or whether it is animal should be more important, that those questions have come up because of the way humans have modified our own lives and changed the way in which nature has originally intended to be. So the harmony between various life forms has been disturbed. So to me, ethical and moral justice is in giving every life its equal chance to live its own suffering free existence. So natural way of life is something which is absent now. As a species, we have outnumbered the billions of other species in this world. And therefore, we have become destructive, as a result of that. So we have a moral responsibility to try and control or contain our damage. And therefore, we have a moral responsibility towards the other species as much as we have towards ourselves.
Yeah.
So to me, it is a matter of having the right judgment, ensuring the balance is being there. And I think, it's the biggest social justice movement today of, respecting sentience. So every life form, if you see, they all have a purpose. As humans, we have created divisions. We have created divisions among humans. We have made in our own minds compartmentalized that certain animals can be eaten, certain animals should be shot, certain animals are, should be controlled for entertainment or used for entertainment. And, being ethical is to me, not to harm life. In whatever way you might want to think of, whether it is for food or fashion or entertainment or anything else. So I have come to terms with that kind of an understanding today, and I try to live that way as much as I can. But as you know, it is not always easy. So we have built these concrete structures all over, which has destroyed habitats of many animals, and we find snakes, invading, and there is conflict, human snake conflict, human elephant conflict, border areas. There is this wild boar. So you look at everything, humans have a conflict.
Yeah, in this context, one may be forced to, ask, is it really necessary to domesticate animals? Or, of course, people have compassion to pet animals. They wish to have pet animals. So there is this argument that animals should be allowed to live in their own natural habitat. There is this story of the seagulls, losing their ability to catch fish because, there was a factory feeding these seagulls with the seagulls or pelican, I don't clearly remember, seagulls with the waste from the meat processing factory. And when that factory was shut down or relocated to some other place, and this, birds lost their ability to catch fish. These kind of stories are there on the other side. So is it really necessary to have domesticated animals, pets, and also the street dogs are, abandoned, animals. So do we have to create this kind of a situation, as part of the civilization, as you said, when humans multiplied, this happened. Also, I recently read that, the animals have their own birth control, systems within, which is, it is in their genetic, behavior. And so how do you see the, face these questions? What will be your
Yeah, yeah. So to be, ethically and morally, not being subjective. I mean, to have a what you call a non-subjective type of a judgment, I would say. Like animals have their own way of. They existed before us. So it is not that these animals are dependent on humans for their well-being or their life. So we are breeding them today for our purposes, like we are breeding them for milk, meat, and leather, or any consumables which humans are using. They breed animals for their purpose, but these animals don't naturally, they exist without human intervention. They can exist without human intervention. And like you said, there is no need for a pet. I mean, pets as such is a concept humans have introduced, right? It is a no animal. I mean, like, okay, my dog is now sitting next to me in a very cozy way and all, but probably this dog will be very happy being in its own world outside. And as you rightly pointed out, the population control mechanisms that exist in nature is by itself, it balances it out. You don't need a human to come and do birth control. Why we do birth control today is because of proliferation of street dogs, which was a result of human actions or inactions. So putting garbage on the street and throwing stuff all around has resulted in these street dogs breeding. Prolific proliferation of street dogs is mainly because of improper waste management. So when humans have intervened in manners which have resulted in certain populations going out of control, or breeding of animals needing destruction of them. So for example, this is this egg industry where there is an egg industry and there is a broiler industry where chicken are raised differently. For the broiler industry, chicken are raised for a certain, different standards. Egg industry, you only want females because that's where you are. And the male chicks are just, as soon as they're born, they're crushed and they're. So it is, you look at from an ethical standpoint, it just feels so, immoral and unethical to destroy life that you're creating and then you're doing. I mean, you have no right to do it. Yeah. So that is one aspect. There's the second thing which I feel, which is something more fundamental to thing is, as species, humans have our own lifestyle, our own thing. And when we make animals as part of our lives, we try to modify their behavior. Even my dog sitting like this, she has adapted to our lifestyle. It's not that we have adapted to them. So they have adapted to that. So animals have their own mechanism to adapt, which humans have lost. So you look at when animals live in domesticated, even cows or goats or the farm animals, as you might see, they have a way. If people leave them out, I know there are people who leave their goats and cows out, and evenings they are not going to bring them back. They just come back because they have adapted. But as humans, we fail to adapt to others. We want everything to be done in our own way. And
yeah.
Yes.
No, actually, I wanted to tell you, she is very obedient and very adorably sitting on your lap. I was just imagining in her place, was it being a human child, this interview itself would not have been possible.
Human child, as you know, will not sit like this.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but humans don't adapt. I mean, we have lost. We don't want to adapt, and I think as we have, as with the passing of time, I think we have become less and less adaptable, and we have lost our senses of the senses that which we had previously. I think our ancestors or our great ancestors, they all had the sense of understanding, which is way beyond what we do, even in spite of all the technology or everything that we have. We have lost the inherent senses that we have had. So I feel, as evolution has progressed, humans have actually, lost some of our abilities in living more harmonious with nature and all of that.
Now, Madhu,
An extension to the question.
Yeah, please.
An extension to the question that you asked earlier about drawing lines is about we use the word ethical also in a compartmentalized sense.
That is
okay, but we define ethics as per our convenience. But truly speaking, ethics has only one spiritual understanding. So whether you're ethical to how your activities affect the people around you, your family, your community, your society, your country, nation, the animals, other beings around you, nobody should be negatively affected if you are ethical. So, but thing is that we have conveniently changed the definition according to the way we want. So, obviously, we can't change this overnight. But if at least a good number of people can even think a minute about the ramifications of every action of theirs, that is sufficient. That itself will make a huge enough change.
Yes.
Right now, we don't even think. But even if you're able to think 50% of the time about the ramifications of our actions, that itself is sufficient to make a huge change to this world, is what I believe in. I just wanted to point out here, this United Nations a few years back, maybe a couple of decades back, after a lot of deliberation, many countries sat together around a table and debated for months together to come up with a definition of sustainability. Okay, and this is how it goes. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is the official definition of sustainability, and people debated a lot to come up with this definition. And this was maybe a couple of decades ago. Somewhere in 2000, I think, is when all these countries met and then debated and came up with this definition. But there's another definition that came in somebody said something in 1920, I'll tell you who said it later. In 1920, 100 years back, the earth, the air, the land, and the water are not an inheritance from our forefathers, but on loan from our children. So we have to hand over to them at least as it was handed over to us. The earth provides enough to satisfy every man's needs, but not every man's greed. Mahatma Gandhi said this 100 years ago. And I don't see any difference from the modern definition of sustainability that everybody debated and came up with.
I fully agree. That is the best best definition anybody can have, on earth, and that reminds me of Khalil Gibran also, like your children are not our children. We whatever damage we are doing to the earth or sustainability here, we owe to our children. We are stealing their life, from them. Their, children, grandchildren, whoever. You're stealing their life from them. In fact, it was the right quote, the right point. Now, Madhu, I wanted to ask you. Mini was mentioning about waste management, and there is a link between waste management and the street dogs, cows, whatever, abandoned animals in the street.
Okay, so, solid waste management and stray animal control are very, very intimately connected. As was earlier pointed out, the number of stray animals in an area is directly proportional to the amount of food available. Now we don't have any waste management, so there is a abundant garbage, food waste available on the road. So therefore, the dogs proliferate. So they are very intimately connected. And also the key thing about animal birth control is that you maintain a steady dog population in a location. So whatever dogs that are there, they are the number is governed by the amount of food available. They have an internal mechanism to do it. What we are trying to achieve by animal birth control is that maintain the same number of dogs and don't allow them to multiply, but at the same time do proper waste management. Without that, if we don't do waste management, then we can't maintain that number. Other dogs will move in. Other dogs will move in to match the amount of food available. So we always get asked these questions. Aren't you doing something unnatural by sterilizing these dogs? Yeah. So the thing is that yes, we sterilize. You can call it unnatural, but we are doing it only as a lesser of two evils. If there was a time when dogs don't proliferate and they are able to have a good quality life on the street, there would be no need for any sterilization. Today, because of
dogs on the street.
Yeah, because of proliferation and the dogs on the street, that's why we are forced to intervene. Otherwise, we don't have to intervene.
Yeah, I think I think the question is about whether dogs should be there or so. It's not like you're saying dogs must be on the street. So why are dogs there? So dogs are there on the street because of resource availability. See, no animal will move to an area where food is not there. So if elephants move in summertime, why do elephants come towards human habitats? Because lack of water in their own habitats, they move. So the migration happens where resource is there. So the right to live or the right to sustain as food and water is the basic the fundamental means to exist. So more than anything else, than to all reproduction and sustaining population, all that comes later. But food and water availability is what results in these animals being existing on the street itself, because there is availability. And meat shops or any other shops throwing garbage on the streets, that resulted in, if you see where the dog population is, when we go for control of whenever complaints come, invariably when we go there, it will be a place where a lot of garbage is there, a lot of animals are and there is fights. The situation is almost predictable. When we are going there. So that is humans have created such a environment which has resulted in these animals proliferating and causing in return conflict, which is it's a vicious circle. Okay, so to break that circle, you have to work hand in hand with the human intervention as well as the animal intervention. Animal intervention is more to ensure that animals don't suffer. So people say okay, just go kill all the animals. And while killing, that's a huge argument that these street dogs are causing so much problem. Just go and just kill them all. Just catch them and kill them, or put poison and kill them. So why it doesn't work is because we keep putting more and more. 100% elimination of a species is impossible, because nature has its way of so that somewhere some population will be remaining. They will come and they will start breeding once more. So it is a matter of like 6 to 7 months. You will see whole bunch of new animals being reproduced. So how many times will you keep culling? So the reason of animal birth control as being the most effective is that most humane is because the resource availability and the animal population gets balanced. You work on the waste management, you work on the dog population, you work hand in hand, keep reducing your waste, the population automatically reduces. But to bring it down to reasonable levels of not having conflict, you have to intervene in terms of animal birth control. Especially with respect to street dogs. See, as you know, street dogs multiply very quickly. 1 litter has 8 to 9 puppies. And in the when they reach 5 to 6 months, they are ready to reproduce again. So the frequency and the litter size is like so, because it's a sustaining of their own species, which makes them proliferate in that manner.
You cannot just like we cannot.
So elephants have one offspring. Humans have 1 or 2 or whatever. So we all have that that is the nature's way of balancing. And where the threat is there, where there is the species sustenance is compromised, that is when animals reproduce in large numbers, because there is some way of sustaining the species. So we have to somehow intervene because of the excessive garbage and the excessive population.
Now a very pertinent question about rabies in India. India is a country with the largest number of rabies cases in the world. Next is Congo. Now, in 2017, 6 million bites dog bites have been reported, and annual average is about 20,000. And HAS is also doing a lot of awareness activities and vaccinating the dogs to stop this disease. So, as a country, why there are so many cases of dog bites and rabies? Okay, dog bites I can understand. There are large number of dogs on the street, are probably the highest in the world, and case of rabies is actually a lack of action from the side of the government as well. So why is it like that? Why we are not able to control the spread of the occurrence of rabies?
Yeah, so India does not have a national program for rabies control. Sadly, that is one of the fundamental reasons. Okay, so diseases, we have had diseases like cholera and smallpox and all that have been eradicated. So if rabies also needs to be eradicated, there needs to be action, and there needs to be sustained action, and that is the only way to do it. And rabies as a disease, as I was telling you before, is not well understood by even human doctors who advise strongly to humans who get bitten by their own pet animals at home. It is a provoked bite. So there is something called provoked bite and unprovoked bite. So provoked bite is when an animal is in pain and you try to do something just to protect the animal is biting, or you're playing with your dog and your dog by playful bite. Unprovoked bite is when an animal is really having nervous symptoms. Animal doesn't know what it's doing and is randomly going and biting for no reason. Very rarely an animal will bite without a reason unless it's sick. And normally when dog bites are being reported and all that, so people who are neutral or people who don't like animals may not like this kind of argument when I'm saying it, but most of the time it is caused by the human's action of having provoked the animal in a wrong way. It could be a very simple thing like throwing a stone or trying to run, or there may be inadvertently also there could be actions which the humans have done which resulted in that. So animals will attack when to protect themselves, or animals will attack only when there is a perceived threat of either like maybe for food or for mates also they attack amongst themselves. But a human is attacked only when, in general, only if there has been a provocation or if the animal has been sick. So dog bites being reported has multiple reasons. So we have also evaluated a lot of dog bites, and most of the time it is like cases of simple actions which people have done mainly at home, child playing with the dog and getting bitten, or walking on the street and just trying to provoke an animal that's lying on the side of the street, things like that. But rabies is a very, very serious issue because rabies is not recognized or is in the grand scheme of things, it is not a notifiable disease.
Oh, that is a really
like
shocking.
Other notified.
So how has intervened in policy making, in influencing the Animal Welfare Board of India to take serious action in this case?
Yeah. So rabies. Yeah. So in many countries, as you know, in many developed countries, rabies is eliminated. There is absolutely no incidence of rabies except in the wild. So yeah. But in India, rabies is rampant, and India is a rabies endemic country. So whenever a dog goes from a pet gets adopted, or we have volunteers who come from abroad who love Indian dogs and they want to. So it's a huge process to send them out of the country because India is rabies endemic. We have to do what is called this rabies titer test on the pet, which has to be approved by a European or a foreign lab. They don't even accept the titer values which our labs do it, because so much is the lack of trust or faith in our ability to manage this disease. And it really talks, it speaks volumes about the inaction as a national policy by the government, because they don't have a policy of act. It is very easy to do. In fact, rabies control is one of the simplest things to do by mass vaccinating dogs, and also by enforcing every pet animal having a license and enforcing vaccination like in foreign countries. See, we lived in America for many years and we had pets there, and they will never, even you get a fine if your pet does not have a current vaccination tag. And they even find that out by, when in your absence, they will say if your pet is, in your backyard, they can see the color of the tag, and if the color of the tag is not current for that year, you will be slapped a fine on your door. You will find
They will come and look through the fence, and then look at they'll come and look through the fence and see the color of the tag on the dog's neck, and they will know whether it's current or not.
So
and they'll put a fine.
So if you fail to vaccinate your pet, you will be fined. So here in our country, we don't even have a licensing for pets. Maybe in some places there may be, SPCAs or government may have, but it is very rare. The whole of Tamil Nadu, there is no way of, at least I know, there is no way of getting a license for your pet. You can have, nobody can claim ownership. If you abandon your pet on the street, there is no way that you can, pin the owner to this pet. There is no microchipping. There is no ownership as such. It is a very loose type of relationship. In apartments, conflicts happen because there is no way of controlling. And vaccination records people don't keep. People don't vaccinate their pets. So that is the reason why rabies is really, rampant in this country. And it is very unfortunate because it's one of the easiest things to do. Vaccinating your pet and vaccinating street dogs can be done very easily and in a simple way, and it costs very, very less. A human rabies vaccination is very expensive. And many times, the doctors recommend what is called as immunoglobulin, even when it is not required, because rabies is a very deadly disease. And once you contract rabies, there is no cure. So rabies can only be prevented, it cannot be cured. So whether it is any mammal, all mammals can, by the way, or any mammal can get rabies. But why dog is, the vector, the dog is, canine is the vector closest to human, and, the other animals like cow or elephants or anybody, any of them can get rabies, but they don't go around biting and they don't go around spreading. So they are like what they call as the end, they are the last chain. But for dogs, they are not the last chain. They usually spread. They usually go around biting other dogs. They bite your pet. They can bite you. So it is an inaction. It is very sad, and the rabies is not notifiable. In all dog bites have to be recorded, and many times it is not recorded with the right cause. How did the bite happen? Where, whether it was for it. So we did survey when we did the dog population survey. When we were trying to intervene, do dog there is this dog population intervention, which is like a big thing now, and rabies free. The World Rabies Day is celebrated on Louis Pasteur's birthday to celebrate, because he developed the vaccine, the anti-rabies vaccine was developed by Pasteur, and the Pasteur Institute, which is in Kunnur, which is very close to us. In spite of all of this, vaccinations are never done, and other than Humane Animal Society in Coimbatore, there is absolutely no vaccination as a program.
Now, Madhu, the question.
One more thing about rabies. Rabies not being a notifiable disease. The other problem is that every statistic that we hear about rabies is questionable, because it's not unlike other diseases, where if it's a notifiable disease, they have to record. If a cholera happens, then they need to record as per a procedure. But for rabies, there is no procedure. So if you go to a general hospital, everybody will give their own statistics of how many bites came. Okay, so whether a particular bite was a rabies bite or not, nobody would know. But since they come with a dog with a unknown dog bite case, they have to administer rabies vaccine as a policy. But the original dog might not have been rabid, but they might record it as a rabid case. So the statistics are very questionable, because it is not being notifiable. There is no approved process for recording a bite appropriately. And on top of it, the language also plays a very deadly role here. So, for example, in Tamil, the word for rabid dog is Verinai. Okay. Verinai is the technical Tamil word for a rabid dog. But the word very can be used even for a angry dog.
Angry dog, aggressive dog, yes.
So anybody who sees an angry dog, they will say very nice, and the two other guys who will listen to that will say that the dog is a rabid dog. Okay, so at least in some languages, at least there are clear cut. In Malayalam, for example, the word "pay" is not used for an angry dog. So clearly, it means a certain thing. But Tamil, it can mean both an angry dog or a rabid dog. People use interchangeable
issues aggravating the whole thing.
Yes. But ultimately, it creates a fear psychosis in the negative fear psychosis in society. Oh, there is a rabid dog. We should kill all rabid dogs.
That is why I wanted to ask you. There is a lot of cruelty to animals.
The Prevention of Cruelty Against Animals Act, the PCA Act, was enacted in 1960. Okay, when it was enacted, it was probably one of the most comprehensive set of animal protection laws that existed anywhere in the world. It was initiated by Rukmini Devi Arundale, the founder of Kalakshetra, who initiated that as a big animal activist. But sadly, as how other laws are enforced in our country, this also is the enforcement is woefully inadequate. Secondly, the fines that were instituted at that time still remains the same. Today, if we can do the most offensive act against an animal, and the fine for that is 100 rupees. 50 rupees. Okay, 50 rupees. You can do whatever you want. You can do the most horrible thing to an animal and just pay 50 rupees and get away with it. Today, there are many amendments to the PCA Acts and many associated acts, which actually are very, very comprehensive. I would probably argue that still they are more comprehensive than anywhere else in the world. But as far as implementation goes, we are probably at very, very far distance from anywhere else in the world too.
Yeah, but that holds true with every other law in the country as well.
Yeah, and not just with the animal. It's not just for animal welfare. Any other law, it fails in implementation or partially.
And you were telling about abuse. So abuse happens so much to humans too. So, and if you really trace back, many of these abuse where an animal is involved, you will see that those humans who have inflicted such cruelty towards the animal have been cruel to humans also. So there is that psychological impairment or something in the mind which gets some kind of satisfaction in inflicting cruelty or abuse to a vulnerable creature. So now we can talk about women and children and animals. So if you
all are vulnerable, including animals.
The spectrum. Yeah, that's the spectrum. Where physical supremacy can result in the feeling of control. Why would a medical doctor, a doctor who, a person, a human who is training to be a medical doctor, throw a very friendly animal and videograph it and derive so much of social media presence and fame because of that action? Just think about what is in their mind. So we are seeing a lot of the sociopath type of behavior and
kind of activities
and social media has also this is the other side of social media, where on one hand we have increased awareness and the spreading of good news and being able to influence and be change makers and all that. Social media has a big role to play. But on the other hand, you also have the social media bringing these kind of things, this abuse and violence, where people somehow, deriving pleasure in putting those up on their timelines and walls and all, which is also a very negative thing. I would say that animals get better care with people who are more connected with nature. And we see, if you look at street dog welfare, for example, and we have been doing a lot of, going to slums and going into areas where we have intervened in vaccinations and all that. But you see people who are, below poverty line, people who actually don't have 3 meals a day, even 1 meal a day. They actually take care of their animals better and look after them with more, I wouldn't call the care like, they may not be sitting on the bed, or they may not be cuddling with them, or they may not be doing certain fashionable things. But, in terms of their well-being and their welfare, and in terms of making them happy. And many times you have people who hit animals and just speed away, even when they know that they have hit. I mean, to me, that is like really, something very, very difficult, because it might have been, the animal might have jumped in the middle of it might have been a situation where they could not have controlled, that accident. It is an accident, but nevertheless, when it has happened, the least you can do is to stop and see what has happened, and at least try to do something.
In fact, if you look at the atrocities that happen, all the problems that the female of the human species face, the same behavior is translated to animals as well. For example, we every day we get calls about abandoned or puppies on the street, and you'll find that all the males have been taken. Only the females will be left behind. There will be all the males will be adopted. People generally think that the male dogs need not be sterilized. Only the females need to be sterilized. And this is a everyday education process. And this is even among people who are so-called educated and well aware. They think that, okay, male dogs need not be sterilized because it's not their problem. If something happens, it's only the neighboring female dog's problem to deal with any unwanted pregnancy. And then same thing about rabies also. We find that many people who are supposed to be aware, not having vaccinated their pet dogs, endangering themselves as well as the dog in the process. This happens very, very often. So same thing about behavior with dogs. For example, earlier it was mentioned that about unprovoked dog bites. We have seen so-called unprovoked dog bites so many times, and it's very, very rare that actually the bite was unprovoked. There might be probably of 100 bites, which are so-called animal bites, maybe 1 or 2 might be truly unprovoked bites, or because of let's say, call it a personality disorder of the dog. Just like human people have a different personality, there might be one dog with an odd personality that might bite unprovoked, but that's a very, very rare case. Even in the case of that very tragic incident of one lady being bitten to death in the suburbs of Trivandrum, if you look closely, it was an accident waiting to happen. It was unfortunate that that person died, but the whole incident happened because the area that she was going was filled with meat waste, and there was a lot proliferation of dogs in that area, and she was going there at night, and there were dogs were probably
carrying meat.
People said that she was carrying some waste also to throw it away. So people tried to attack. We don't know the facts, but the fact is that the exact fact we do not know. But we know one fact that we know is that it was an accident that was waiting to happen.
If you work a lot with animals, you will also be you'll also realize that this whole feeding is actually counterproductive, or it is not really a good thing to do. Feeding when a hungry animal to give a food, or if an animal is sick or injured, providing treatment is one aspect. But this whole mass feeding, which many places they have undertaken, has, like you previously pointed out, that the survival instincts and the skills of these animals to find their own food and their own thing, you are actually compromising that, or you're interfering with their ability to do it, and you are making them dependent on humans, which is not a good thing. Yes. So if you ask me, in all our interactions with people, one of the things we tell people to do is, if you ever feed animals, you also have to take care of the responsibility of getting them spayed, neutered, and vaccinated, which is important. See, if you keep feeding and the animal keeps on reproducing, and you don't care about what happens to the offsprings, and you keep feeding them again, now you end up resulting in a problem where all the neighborhood people are being affected because of your action of feeding. And also, feeding has certain negative things, like dogs are extremely, especially with dogs are extremely territorial animals, and you start feeding in a particular area, especially in front of your house, in front of certain places where multiple people, there is like a path or a major thoroughfare where people walk back and forth. Such areas, if you are feeding, the animals start becoming, they become territorial. They start biting, or they start guarding their and there's a lot of conflict happens. A strange person comes in the middle of the night, or somebody walks that is unfamiliar, they can actually be chased and bitten. And this is a bad behavior for a dog, which is very, very wrong, negative, which is not recommended at all. But it is again caused by humans who have done that. So feeding in front of your homes, feeding in front of places where children play, all of this is really, really not recommended.
Feeding in the same place is not recommended.
Feeding in the same place for the same animal. So they kind of get used to it and they expect the food there. And when they don't expect the food there, they lose their ability to go in search of food, because they don't remember anymore where to go and find the food. And you find these animals, especially when construction site is where the this is one typical example. Like in the construction sites, when workers come, they love dogs, because that is their way of guarding their property, their way of a relationship with the animal. They have a great bonding. Wonderful. As long as they are there, the animal is there, everything goes hunky-dory. The moment construction site is finished, construction is over, and the people move away,
loss of
trouble starts. So they move away, they take their belongings, they go one fine day. All these animals are left, and then they start chasing other things. They expect food. So when a human is walking with a bag, carrying some food or buying groceries and going, they try to attack, because they have been used to people so these are all what human caused conflicts, so in my opinion, if you ask me, as somebody who has worked with dogs, I would say, just don't feed animals. Just don't feed animals. And if you feed them, just make sure they're spayed, neutered, vaccinated, and don't let them lose their ability to find food. Feed them randomly. Feed them without any kind of pattern. Maybe intervene only if you see that they are unable to. It is an old animal or a blind animal.
Really tired one day.
It's great to be able to provide food, but you don't have to feed all these healthy animals on the street that can find their own food. So and in Delhi and some big cities, they have started this big what do you call these grounds where at odd hours, late night, like after 10 p.m. they go with a vehicle with food, and these dogs know, and that actually works pretty well. But most of them are also very responsible, that they also I had an IAS officer from Delhi who came to Coimbatore, and he was feeding 55 dogs. He and his wife used to feed 55 dogs every single day. And when he left, he also had alternate arrangements made for these dogs to be fed in a big ground where they actually carry. And there are also multiple people who bring food and give, and they also make sure these are vaccinated every year.
When you're talking about activities of HAS, we listed 5 activities, but we also work through 2 centers in Coimbatore. One of these centers is in the city, and that's where all the inpatient activity happens. So every day we run a outpatient clinic where people bring their animals for some kind of treatment, and also all the animals that are adopted through our system get lifelong free treatment. So they keep coming for some kind of vaccination or some intervention, and that happens every day from 9 to 10. And all the other surgeries, treatment, or IP inpatient treatment, all that happens in the center of the city. And that center is owned by the corporation, but we are managing it for the corporation. And we have put in lots of new improvements to the basic facility that was given to us by the corporation. But the general principle there is that every animal gets treated and it goes back to the location where it came from. Mm-hmm. But those animals which do not have the capability to be on their own on the street live permanently with us in another facility, which we call it as a sanctuary. Mm-hmm. That sanctuary is outside the city limits, about 25 kilometers from here. And we have about 75 animals there, mostly dogs. but we have a few cats. There is one horse with a broken ankle. We have a cow. But those animals do not have the capability to fend for themselves on the streets, and they would live permanently with us.
Permanently.
Most of them are survivors of road accidents, and many of them are three-legged dogs. Many of them are survivors of nervous disorders like canine distemper. Many of them are abandoned dogs, pet dogs abandoned by owners. Many people who buy expensive pets at the first sight of illness, they will abandon them. And so we have and they don't have the skills to survive on the street, so we can't send them back on the street, so they will spend the rest of their lives with us, because adult dogs rarely get adopted. Most of the time adoption happens only as puppies. Once the adults, many people are reluctant to adopt dogs, so they will have to end up living with us in the sanctuary for the rest of their life. So this is also part of our daily activity.
Are the veterinary hospitals doing these kind of surgeries? How adequate are their services? Because you are an NGO, but how adequate is the government?
Well, first of all, the huge disconnect in veterinary activity and what we do is that the whole veterinary science is built towards animal husbandry. Okay, how to make animals profitable for humans. So the welfare of the animal is the last thing in general veterinary education, unfortunately. Okay, so even if you see the veterinary hospitals across the country, most veterinary hospitals are almost dedicated to cattle or some form of animal husbandry that is useful for humans. Very rarely do these government hospitals work for animals at large. Okay, so there might be some zoos. Okay, zoo is another big question mark as to whether a zoo should be there or not. But zoos will have veterinary veterinary doctors who will attend to all kinds of animals. But the average run-of-the-mill government hospital is primarily a cattle hospital, and the biggest activity that they do is artificial insemination. Okay. That is the biggest activity that they do, and any treatment they do probably will be for cattle, but for other animals, very, very rare.
Very, very rare.
And facilities are very inadequate. Facilities are very poor. They don't even have a fridge. Medicines are not stored. Most of the time, they will ask the customer to go and buy medicines and come back and vaccinate.
Maintaining cold chain for vaccines, it's very, very poor infrastructure. And in fact, in Coimbatore, as far as and you asked about animal birth control surgery, I don't think we are aware of any facility in the country which does animal birth control on regular basis in a government facility. The ones that we know all are NGOs. The animal birth control across the country is, I can say, almost
only in Kerala is the only place where there is a government
facility.
Government setup facility like the ABCD, they call it in Cochin, and then every district now they have a center which government has set up. I think Kerala is the only state where there is a government led effort towards birth control. Most of the other in the whole of Tamil Nadu, it is NGOs who run it. Almost every state it is it is some non-profit organization who care about animals that run these programs. So it's a huge gap in terms of understanding, in terms of animals' intrinsic value being recognized is just doesn't exist in this country. Intrinsic value is not recognized. It is more a question of how is the animal beneficial to humans. Even small animal practice is becoming more, it's the lucrativeness of the small animal practice that is.
So, in fact, if you want to be more human, you have to understand animals as well. And
yes, absolutely. I mean, that is a statement I would make very, very vehemently, because human welfare, and whenever we talk about human welfare, we want to say human welfare, animal welfare too. But actually, a lot of human welfare depends on animal welfare, and it's interconnected. It's so intertwined in a very complex way, and you need to be very cognizant of that at every point, to be able to appreciate that in both ways. A lot of human related, I mean, like an invisible virus, like you said, it's an organism that you can't see, and it has resulted in bringing the whole world. It's not even one part of a country, one district. The whole world is brought to the knees by one invisible organism. So we need to understand this a lot more than what we think. And I think the technology and all that is going towards in one direction. But I think from a level of comprehension and understanding and what you call, you used a word before, I'm just not in it.
Conscience.
Like, conscience. Yeah. So the conscience, I mean, we feel that we are at a higher conscience level, but actually we will realize that the animals are at a much higher conscience level in terms of the balance that they have
being in sync with
nature. You see an animal adapt to a situation very, very quickly, and they kind of, they're able, their survival skills just, come up, in a very remarkable way when an adverse situation presents itself. I mean, and you see it very often. I mean, we rescue animals that are, you think on the verge of death, and we think, they're going to collapse the next day. And, the next day you see it's a totally transformed animal, because they would have, their ability to survive is so much. And whereas as humans, we are so helpless, and more so nowadays, our survival skills have actually, gone down, over time.
Yeah.
So, and even in this pandemic, because suddenly they were deprived of food because all these eateries and everything was under lockdown, and dogs underwent a lot of migration during that time because they couldn't find food at their regular places, and we could not, many dogs which were seen for a long time at one location, they all had disappeared and moved to other locations where they could find food. So a lot of relocation happened during this time. So I'm trying to point out the fact that they adapt themselves to a situation much better than us.
Because there is no support, so they have to find it, for themselves. The human being, a lot of support system. So
I think we have created the support systems, right? We have actually artificially created those support systems, and so at the drop of a hat, we want to run to a hospital. We don't want our own immune systems to work towards healing. We have lost our immune systems, I would say. We have destroyed it by overuse of antibiotics and so much. We run to a hospital for nothing. Whereas, and I think if we let our bodies heal on its own, we would have a much, much better harmony with nature. We would be, and enjoy better health. As our grandparents, or I mean, we might see, much better health in our grandparents compared to us, which is, yeah.
And just one more thing I wanted to point out was that two things. One was that I was talking about this HCL award, that there was no category for considering us. But the fact that we sent in a good application, they were so convinced about it, they actually added animal welfare as one of the categories in the following year. So that way, I think our work is not only directly impacting, at least even if it impacted one organization to include animal welfare in the CSR activity, I think it was a big success.
You are becoming change leaders too. You are becoming change leaders too. That is the buzzword.
Change leaders. Yeah, and also one closing remark I would want to say about India as a country. So India has, it is not the lack of process that is a problem here. It's more a question of, enforcing the process, implementation. And if a person who is good is responsible for implementing, that works beautifully, because the process is good. And it's in animal welfare also one of the best laws. Even today, if you compare the animal welfare laws, India has one of the best animal welfare laws. And even today, it is not broken. In fact, a lot of other countries, they have read all this and they have felt, it is so many very subtle things are spelled out, and there's no ambiguity. But, enforcement is zero. Whereas in most of the other developed countries, if you see, of course, there are good leaders and bad leaders, and they can do damage, personality-wise, they can do. But the process is so much well. As a common person, you don't really face a lot of issues, even if the people change. Who are the elected officials change or something happens. It's not like law. The common as a common person, you wouldn't experience a lot of change. Whereas in India, it's not that way. India, there is like drastic, and it affects every strata of society.
I again want to conclude with what Gandhiji said. And the greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way their animals are treated.
Yeah,
And I hope,
yes. Yeah.
And I hope that we can live up to that expectation.
Yeah,
your pet is sitting, very obedient, peacefully. It is possible. Means they can follow you, and it is very important. And you have to respect them as well. So this is the takeaway from this interview. And thanks a lot, Mini and Madhu, for this interview. We have learned a lot of things, and also you have a lot of message to be given to the world around you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity. It's a great pleasure talking to you about our work. I don't think, even though you probably have learned about our work over the past years, this kind of a candid conversation where all these questions were being raised and asked. I mean, these are all so pertinent, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jazeela, for this interview, and also appreciate your efforts in interviewing many of the other leaders in similar activities of their own in different cross-sections of society, as I've been seeing in the last couple of weeks. And I wish you the very best in this venture to bring more leaders to public knowledge.
Certainly, we will be bringing more leaders who are working with this kind of a passion. Thank you so much. Thanks.
And,